Hello everyone, my name is Councillor Bangra. I am from the Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead, and we're here to speak about the COVID vaccines today. We're joined with the Rabbi Jonathan Romain from Maidenhead Synagogue. Hello, welcome. And we're here with our lead member, Councillor Stuart Carroll for Health. So he's here to answer questions that Jonathan Romain will have. Thank you. Jonathan, if you'd like to go ahead and ask Stuart questions you'd like to know.
Well, I'm delighted that the vaccine rollout is happening as fast as it seems to be, because it's very much the light at the end of the tunnel that we've all been waiting for. So, do you want to just tell me at the moment, which age groups you're targeting? Is it the over 80s? Have we got down to the 70s?
Yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost, thank you for joining us this evening, Jonathan. Very much appreciate it. In terms of where we are with the vaccination programme, there's a body called the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, JCVI, and they recommended to government that 4 cohorts be targeted first. That's the people in care homes and frontline care home worker staff, then people over 80 and NHS frontline staff, then going into the over 70s, over 60s clinically vulnerable risk groups. The good news is locally, we have vaccinated everybody within the care home setting and all care home staff. We have now marched on into the subsequent cohorts of the over 80s and NHS frontline staff. And we've started the process of moving into those next 2 cohorts, which include those age groups as described, and the clinically vulnerable people as well, who also are at risk, particularly at risk. And the reason those cohorts were decided, it's just worth emphasising, because we often get this question, is because the JCVI recommended to government that we focus in on those people who are at an immediate risk of death and also at the highest risk of severe illness or disease. And of course, that tends to be people who are older with weakened immune systems or people with underlying clinical conditions. What's really good to note is that locally we are currently what we call green on the dashboard. So we are moving at very rapid pace and we're on target to contribute to the national target of hitting that 15 million people having been vaccinated by mid-February. So far, so good.
And am I right in saying that people shouldn't apply to have it? They should wait for an invitation from their GP or the local health authority?
That's correct. So it will come from the NHS direct through GP surgeries. They will make contact with each individual when they need to be vaccinated. That will come via a form of a letter, email or text. And then there's information contained within those methods of communication, how to book an appointment. What's really important is as soon as people get that information is that they book an appointment immediately. The NHS, of course, is under a lot of stress, a lot of strain, a lot of pressure, not least dealing with COVID itself on the front line. But of course, we want people to be immunised with their first dose as quickly as possible. And the quicker people book an appointment, the quicker that can be done. One thing we are noting, and this is really important for people to be aware of, if anybody has any concern that they're not registered with a GP or for some reason their contact details are incorrect, then in that case, of course, make contact with the NHS, because of course the NHS can't make contact with you if they don't know who you are. So that's just an important message to get over. If anybody does have that concern, please do not hesitate to make contact. The NHS will register you. And if you are in one of those cohorts, you will then be called to be vaccinated.
Yes, I mean, certainly I know many members of my community, the synagogue, have already had their first jab. And 1 or 2 have said, "Oh, I've gotten the invitation, should I go?" And I say, "Yes, absolutely. You're the lucky one because you've been offered it. So don't hesitate, go for it immediately, both to protect yourself and, of course, also to protect other people." And is there a choice of which inoculation there is? Because there's the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer. Who decides who gets what?
Excellent question. And first and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for that message. Just articulating that message to your community about getting vaccinated is critical. And I really appreciate your leadership there, because that makes all the difference. And fantastic those people have gone and got immunised and got protected. So wonderful to hear. In terms of the vaccines themselves, you don't get a choice, because what the NHS is having to do is pull through this programme at pace, at speed, and that's dependent on the supply that's coming from the manufacturers. These vaccines have to be stored at certain temperatures, certain conditions, so it isn't always possible to preempt that or predetermine that. What is important to emphasise here is both of the vaccines are safe, they're effective, they're of high quality, and they will give very, very good protection. And the data emerging on both of those vaccines from the real world, because we've already done 10 million vaccinations as of today, is absolutely backing up the clinical trial data. So reasons to be positive, reasons to be optimistic.
And in terms of location, I realise you're going into care homes, but for sort of ordinary householders, there's a central venue in the Royal Borough, is there? That's
correct. So for care homes, as you say, what happened there was that NHS staff went into those care homes to vaccinate directly, because you can't expect people in care homes to go to locations. In some cases, it's just too risky, or people have severe disabilities, and staff also working in those areas were vaccinated on location, on site. In terms of the other cohorts, there have been sites set up in the Town Hall in Maidenhead and Windsor Racecourse. And what is now happening with the broader rollout of the programme, other sites are being identified, including utilising some pharmacies to allow for even greater speed as we start moving through the cohorts. So a lot of planning goes on behind the scenes to allow for what we call immediate deployments. Effectively, as soon as you have a vaccine available, you can get someone in, vaccinate, and it's done in a very pacey, rapid way. This is a mass immunisation programme, so speed is everything.
Yeah. I've had a few people who said, "Oh, I'm a bit worried I haven't had mine, hadn't had my invitation yet." And I said, "Look, don't worry, you're too young." And I must admit, there's a lot of 70-year-olds who haven't heard me say that to them for a very long time. You're too young, but I'm sure their turn will come. Do we have a sort of a date for the next sort of cohort, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, great for people to hear, even when they're in their 70s, they are young, and we have some, fantastic people in our community who are young, and they should feel young, and they will get their vaccine. Locally and indeed nationally, we are now moving into those cohorts. So because we're moving into those cohorts, people should expect to be getting contact, within the coming days, coming weeks. Of course, what the NHS has to do, again, is do that in a sequential way. So it will tend to pick people who, are the oldest, or people with a clear clinical condition. So don't worry, for example, if you have a neighbour next door who, is maybe 73 and you're 78 and think, well, why is that person going to get vaccinated? It may be because that person's got asthma. It might be because they've got diabetes. They might have an underlying condition. This is, the whole NHS, remember, is based on the principle of equity. So the NHS is not picking and choosing who it wants to vaccinate. It's doing it based on the science, the data, and in a highly equitable way.
Right. And I suppose the big question is, given the amazing rollout across not just the Royal Borough, but across the country, does there come a tipping point where enough people have been vaccinated so that some of the lockdown restrictions can start to be eased?
So that's a fantastic question. I think it's difficult for us to answer that at the moment from an infectious disease point of view, because that very much depends on how much of the virus is still in what we call the epidemiological space, effectively in the environment. That depends on things like transmission. It depends on how these new strains are behaving and how they're mutating. What we do know, though, is that, of course, the quicker we get more people vaccinated, the more likely it is that we can move to a situation where we can start easing some of those restrictive measures. I think the other real beacon of hope is that some of the evidence that's come from the AZ Oxford vaccine, which could almost certainly be translated to other vaccines, is that there is early evidence, and we must be cautious on this. We've got to keep following the data, the science, but there is initial data to suggest it might also stop onward transmission. So we know these vaccines can protect an individual. What we haven't known so far is, can it stop transmission? Now, if that hypothesis and those early data pull through, that is a big, big moment, because we then know there's something effectively called herd immunity at play, whereby vaccinating an individual isn't just beneficial to that person, but it's also going to stop them spreading it to someone else. So we don't know at this point, but what I can say is the more people we get vaccinated, the quicker we'll get to that destination. And of course, that's where we all want to be.
Yeah, well, that's great news to hear, because, you know, the first lockdown, everyone was a bit, very novel. Second lockdown, here we go again. The third lockdown, the current one, people felt, oh my goodness me, you know, getting really fed up, really exhausted. But this time it's different, because there is actually a vaccine, well, not on the horizon, but actually in our midst. So hopefully this will mean that this will be the last lockdown. And although there will be, you know, some caution, some restrictions in the way we go forward, we're actually going to be able to say fairly soon we've beaten it. Not that it'll disappear completely, and that, I suppose, a bit like flu, it'll always be there, or measles, or whatever, but at least we'll have got on top of it and can sort of begin to resume a sort of normal life, even if it's a slightly new normal.
I think that's correct. Of course, the question we can't answer at the moment is the timings around that. But what we do know is that if we can vaccinate as many people as possible quickly, and that's why it's so vital everybody steps forward to get vaccinated, because it's not just an individual responsibility, it's a social responsibility, because we can't defeat this as individuals, we have to defeat this as populations. It will put us in that position where we can start to move through the pandemic, maybe more to an epidemic, more to just outbreaks, and then treating it like a routine immunization program for routine infectious diseases, like you say, like flu, like measles, like polio, so on and so forth. But I think the message has to be that will only be achieved if we all get vaccinated, and we all do that as quickly as possible. And the other thing I would note is that the reason why it's so important for those of us who can get vaccinated do get vaccinated. And thankfully, the majority of us are eligible when our time comes and when the NHS comes calling. There are smaller cohorts of people for very legitimate reasons who are what we call in medical terms contraindicated, because they have underlying conditions. You know, for example, someone who's got cancer and is on chemotherapy and is immunosuppressed, their immune system isn't working properly, can't get the vaccine. So it's important all of us who can get vaccinated do so to then protect those smaller cohorts of people who, for no fault of their own, can't get the vaccine. And there's some of the other social reasons why we have to sometimes just think above and beyond ourselves or our immediate family. You know, this is about all of us. We're only going to defeat this virus and push it back by doing this together. I'm so pleased, you know, I know the Jewish community has been at the forefront of this, and what you said earlier, you know, that sort of messaging from yourself to people just to say, look, absolutely get the vaccine, you know, brilliant, you know, fantastic message.
Well, I have to say this, you know, this has been great news, because although, as we all know, there have been a few hiccups and a few wrong turns, you know, since a year ago, I think really both government nationally and locally is sort of getting on top of it. And this is, well, I won't say a dream come true, but it probably is a dream come true, actually, because this is what we all wanted. So well done you, well done everybody. And I tell you, I'm looking forward to my vaccine.
Well, thank you ever so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate you joining us for this Q&A. And just again, I'd like to say a big thanks to everything you're doing and everybody in the Jewish community who, you know, pre-pandemic is such an important part of our community. But, you know, the message you've given here is fantastic. And this is a public health, you know, community effort. And I really, really am grateful for all you're doing. So thank you for that. And I'll pass back to Gurpreet just to close us out.
Yes, I would like to echo my colleagues' words to you. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for joining us today. It was fantastic to have you on. It's a very important message that we are trying to put across all faiths. So again, thank you for Rabbi Jonathan Romain from Maidenhead Synagogue and Councillor Stuart Carroll. Would you like to say something, Jonathan?
Well, I just want to ram home, you know, how important it is by saying that, you know, you mentioned earlier, Stuart, that you were looking to roll it out to further venues. We would be very happy to offer the synagogue. We've got 2 large halls and a car park. So if you needed an extra venue, perhaps on the west side of Maidenhead, then we would be very happy to facilitate it, not just for our own members, just for anyone in the area and for the community at large. So all power to your elbow.
Thank you ever so much. I certainly would take that back and discuss that with NHS colleagues, but that's a wonderfully kind offer, and really appreciate it. Thank you ever so much.
Okay, bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.